Hello students, it's Judson Edwards again, and I look forward to presenting the material for week one. This week we'll focus on financial management, and we're fortunate to have Joe Robinson here, who is Vice President of Lending for Guardian Credit Union, and I'd just like to welcome Joe to Troy University, and we're going to talk a little about financial management for the benefit of the students.
Sounds great.
Joe, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you ended up in the credit union business.
Sure. So I grew up in Prattville, went to college. I won't mention where, but
it's okay. You can say it. That's all right.
I did do some summer work at Troy at some point, so I've been in the system at some point along the way. So,
okay.
But I got out, graduated with an accounting degree, went to work public accounting and in an couple of insurance companies, and got my CPA, but found out that just really wasn't it. What got me going. So got the opportunity to come work with Guardian and started in the finance area there, and then eventually kind of found, I don't know, I guess my home a little bit in the lending area. Got to jump in that, and I've really enjoyed it. Been with Guardian about 8 years, and just love what we get to do by helping people through the lending area in particular.
Well, as this is week one, I think you have the opportunity to kind of lay the groundwork for some of the discussion about getting started on a financial management plan. So I guess as we think about trying to start that process, maybe just mention your thoughts on financial management in general in terms of its importance and how to get started.
Sure. So I think that financial management is so important because it affects everybody. So whether you grew up really good, really wealthy, or not having a thing to your name, whether you grew up in an educated household or one that just didn't have those opportunities, it crosses so many boundaries, and it affects everybody regardless of their situation or station in life. So that's why I think it is so important, and kind of a place that whether you look at it from high schools or colleges to this point, probably haven't done as good of a job as we should have, to prepare people for life in that area. But that's why I'm so excited to be a part of this class and this endeavor, to be able to get this information out to folks so that they can have a good base, a good framework to being able to handle their finances as they get out into the real world. But yeah, so I mean, you can start from all sorts of different places, but it is so important because it affects everybody.
I know for the materials that'll be presented this week, there's going to be, the opportunity for students to develop their own personal budget and working with some software applications to help them do that. As you look at kind of the components of a personal budget, what do you recommend that someone pay perhaps the most attention to as they're getting started?
Sure. So I don't know. I guess I'm a pretty practical guy, and talking about accounting a few minutes ago, it probably doesn't surprise too much anybody. So, but I think about the practical things that you absolutely have to have. Obviously, those take the most. Those are the most important. Getting those things squared away and realizing that you're not necessarily going to have what your parents had or what maybe even your friends have right now, to be able to understand that it's a long game, okay? Mm-hmm. And so starting off and getting the things you have to have taken care of, and making sure that really you're just spending less than you're making, right? And so whether it's the necessities of life, and that doesn't mean don't have any fun, right? Because I think that's the other side of it. People think, oh, I'm taking care of the things that I have to have, but that means I can't have any fun. That's not true. You just can't have fun more than you take care of the necessities, right? And so it's really just what that focus is, and being diligent and sort of paying attention to those things along the way, because it's too easy to let a lot of hard work kind of go by the wayside for a short period of time of having too much fun,
Right.
And so I don't know. I like to tell people to take a look at what you're spending, and is this necessary? Do you really want to finance small everyday kind of expenses, or do you kind of look towards financing on bigger things that you just don't necessarily have the pocket money to handle? So it really more often than not becomes down to what you want to focus on and what you want to pay attention to. And if it's too much trouble to pay attention to how much money you have in the bank, it's going to be hard to have very much money in the bank, because
Right.
it goes away just like that.
When let's talk a little bit about some of the components of the budget. Now, as someone starting out, and you talk about, you can't spend more than you make. What's a recommended level for savings? If someone's starting out, how much of their income do you think they should save on just say a weekly or monthly basis?
No, I
however
think
they're paid?
that's a great question. So I think that depends in certain situations, but I think the best rule of thumb that you can kind of start off with is save something, right? My wife was the one that kind of taught me that as sort of a plan. I thought, well, I can't put big dollars away right now because we're kind of tight on a budget. Well, she just said, hey, put away a little bit. And so you'll be surprised how just getting into the rhythm of putting away a little bit can turn into putting away a little bit more and a little bit more. You hear different thoughts on 80-10-10, which is live off of 80% of what you take home, save 10, give 10 percent. So you've got all sorts of different ideas on it, but I think really it's just getting into a rhythm of it being a part of your budget. Because if it's not a part of your budget, it becomes difficult to insert it, because you've got that space filled up with all those other things that you might even prefer to do, because they give you that sort of immediate response. Man, I feel good because I got to go hang out and do whatever, got to have fun. Saving's not the most fun thing in the world, but it allows you to do some things later that you might not be able to do otherwise, or just deal with some of the things that happen with life, flat tires and the stuff I fuss about, but they're reality, right? It's
Right.
much better to have it sitting in your savings account than to have to rack up debt to just deal with everyday kind of things.
So when you think of someone starting out, building a personal budget, just say they come to Guardian Credit Union, the first step in this is open a checking account and a savings account to start that process of saving. When you look at the loan side of it, one of the things that I do remember was being taught of kind of matching your borrowing with the life of the asset that you're borrowing against. So if it's a car, 5 years, 6 years, 7
Sure.
years, I'm not sure what the
Yeah.
common is now, but if you're buying a home, 30 years. We talk to students about student loan debt, which is something that's just, I know, really weighing on the minds of our students now. But that's also a long-term investment that you're making in your career.
It is.
So maybe talk a little about that, of just making people aware about the best kind of key points to borrowing money.
Sure. So a couple of things is I consider it, and the way I teach it to people a lot of time, I say it's kind of like playing a game. You just kind of have to know the rules of how to play the game, right? And so I think you'll get into this a little further in some of the other discussions, but the way the credit score is built is a very important thing to understand, okay? And so learning that is one of the first things that you can do to really set yourself up well, and then sort of applying that knowledge as you go about taking on debt and having to finance things. So I think understanding that, and you can just look that up online. I mean, it's fairly common knowledge, but if we don't talk about it, you just don't know it. So understanding how that works. But then to your point, like I said, you don't want to put on credit cards that you're not going to pay off, something like Taco Bell or McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, because, I mean, do you really want to pay interest on a fast food meal? That seems silly, right? If you have a choice. If the choice is I'm going to spend less, because that's how much cash I have or how much I have actually sitting in the bank. That's a much better decision. And so that matching off of the time of how long whatever it is you're paying for is going to last versus how long the contract is going to last is pretty important. You really don't want to be paying for a car that doesn't drive anymore because you financed it for 10 years, but it only lasted you 5, because they're still going to want their money. They don't want your car. So that's an important thing to be aware of, and really just making sure you don't get in too deep on things. That's a thing, and they've done some good things with regulation to not allow companies to go out there and kind of take advantage of young borrowers, people that are out there on their own for the first time. And for a free T-shirt, you could get a credit card back in the day on a college campus, and I think they've done a lot of stuff around that. Because it is easy to see, oh, I can get a credit card, it's free money, but it's really not free. You have to pay for it at some point. And so just being really mindful about, can I really pay this back in a reasonable amount of time? How much is this really going to cost me? And being aware too, not just on the credit side, but in any time that you're purchasing things, thinking about the full cost of things, right? And that's where people kind of get sideways on cars sometimes. They think, well, that's how much the car costs. The credit union or bank or whoever will give me the money, I can make the payments. That's great, but does it take premium gas? If something happens to it, is the insurance more expensive than another car? Thinking about what the full picture looks like. And so just not just seeing what's exactly in front of them, but as much of the whole picture as they can see is best.
Well, Joe, we've kind of entered a strange time, and economically of we're dealing with inflation and rising interest rates. And as we kind of wrap up this discussion for week 1, what would be kind of your advice for those that you're building a budget and you're planning for your finances? How do you talk to people about inflation or some of the things we're dealing with now?
So that's been a big discussion over the last couple of years, especially in the real estate market and even in the auto market. Whenever we see prices have only gone up, as it's been tough to get a hold of certain things. I mean, the inventory on homes and vehicles has been difficult to come by, and so that's just driven the prices up. And so it's been a tough place for people to be in, because they say, oh, I can sell my house for so much more than I paid for it. Well, then they forget they have to live somewhere. So then you have to turn around and buy in that same market. And so I think, again, that's just seeing the full picture rather than just kind of what's in front of you. But that's where the goal of really what all of this looks like is when you first start out, there's going to be less margin for error. There's going to be, tighter limits on credit cards and things. There's going to be tighter limits on what your income is. And the goal should be over time to make things easier for yourself. And so if you're diligent and pay attention to what you're doing now, it will make things easier for you later on. The tough part is if you get into a situation where you have to have a vehicle and you're in this crazy market of, well, I have to pay more. Well, there's nothing you can do about that. But it's also to kind of, if you're not in a place where you have to have something, being comfortable with. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I drive a 10-year-old Toyota, and it's paid for. But you know what? It gets me back and forth to where I got to go, and it even has air conditioning, so that's pretty fancy, I know. But just being content. I think contentment's a big word that we lose a lot of the time, and it's tough in the way things are today. It's so easy to get immediate feedback on things and immediate, it's hard to put aside the things that we want and the impulses, but really in the end, long term, it will be better for you if you're able to do that. So.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments about the automobile and driving an older car, because I do the same thing. But that's just another form of savings.
It is.
It's a way that, particularly in times like this that we're facing, where your dollar is worth less. this is you can really maximize the value of what you have. So
Right.
I appreciate you being our week 1 interviewee on behalf of Guardian Credit Union, and I'm sure the students will appreciate all your advice. So thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks for having us.
Students, hope week 1 goes well for you. I think we'll have some interesting projects for you to work, and I look forward to seeing you week 2. Thank you.